have some news this morning, and it is big. Google looking to hang up on Huawei, suspending key business activities for the company's future smartphones. This is a major blow to Huawei. Google had pulled the company's Android license, according to a report by Reuters that was confirmed by tech site The Verge. Now, President Trump signed an executive order last week banning technology sales to Huawei and certain other foreign-owned companies on the grounds that their equipment could be used to spy, posing a national security risk. Now, Google's move means that Huawei will only be able to use what's known as the public open-sourced version of Android. They won't be getting the updates, for example, from Android. Reports say current devices won't receive any system or security updates, and future smartphones won't be able to access features such as YouTube, Gmail, and Google Play. That's a big setback. Huawei has said it spent the last few years developing its own technology as a backup plan in case it was blocked from using Android. Google says it's reviewing the implications of the U.S. order. We should also tell you that other tech companies as well, including Intel, Broadcom, Xilinx, have also reportedly suspended some business with Huawei as well. And German chipmaker Infineon has suspended shipments to Huawei. So you're going to have a huge impact across the board. The question is, does this slow Huawei down? And that's effectively what's happening here, at least seems to be what the effort is by the administration.
I think the most interesting thing you just said was that Huawei has been working on a backup plan for a couple of years, assuming something like this might happen.
Right. Well, because if you don't have right now, if you don't have access to Android, you don't have access to iOS. There is no operating system. And Samsung's tried to build its own operating system. People have tried to do this before. And the question is, how much does this effectively slow Huawei down? And it also raises the question as to whether what we're really trying to do here is slow Huawei down, not just here in the United States, but just everywhere. And that's really what the goal is, that it's not clear whether it's a national security issue or it's a bigger fight over the future of who's going to own and run 5G. You
think any of it is connected to the trade talks, too?
I think it's possibly related to the trade talks, but I think it's much more related to this idea that the U.S., and I know I'm going to get viewers who are going to tell me I'm wrong on this, but I think that from everything I understand, we are woefully behind on 5G relative to what Huawei and China are ultimately able to do. Ericsson, we're dependent on Ericsson at the moment. They're the only hardware provider on this, unless we're to accept Huawei inside our systems, and we aren't. So the question is, what is this about? I think it's a little bit about how do we get back? How do we get back? The question is, I don't know how we get back, because I think we are so far behind when it comes to the routers, when it comes to the microcells. We don't have that technology here right now of our own accord, at least. So we will see. For more on the trade war between the U.S. and China, I want to get over to Eunice Yoon in Beijing. Eunice, good morning. What's the reaction here to Google pulling out effectively?
Well, the foreign ministry has said that they continue to support Chinese companies and to protect legitimate rights. But in terms of Huawei itself, I mean, you had seen the statement that Huawei has said that it's going to continue to support their own smartphones and their own devices. I had heard from one source who closely follows Huawei, though, and they say that Huawei only has about a year's supply of the components from the U.S. So there's definitely a sense of urgency on the part of Huawei that its business could be badly affected. But separate to that, what we were seeing over the weekend was something pretty interesting, because I think that if you were to sit down for a movie night in China over the past couple of days, you would have thought that you were in the middle of a throwback to the 1950s. And that is because the state broadcaster changed its primetime programming lineup to air 3 anti-American movies that showcase China's triumph over America during the Korean War. And in fact, the CCTV even talked about it explicitly, saying that on their social media account that the programming change was to, quote, reflect the era of our times. And these movies now have been discussed in the state media. The Communist Party's Global Times newspaper today said that the China-U.S. trade war reminds us of the war in Korea, when our persistence in the battlefield and continuous victories finally forced the Americans to bow down at the negotiating table. So with the negotiations for the trade war still at a stalemate, this is being seen as a way to prepare the public here for a very long, protracted trade war. Sources told CNBC late last week that the U.S.-China negotiations were in flux. And today, the foreign ministry said that the only hope for a breakthrough would be if negotiations progressed with, quote, mutual respect. And I have to tell you that within the Chinese business community over the past couple of days, I've been talking to a lot of people, especially in the tech industry, and a lot of people are very pessimistic about whether or not a trade deal can be done. So people have been telling me that to watch for June, and if we see a trade deal, if we don't see a trade deal by June, then their expectation is that things are going to get a lot worse between the U.S. and China.
Hey, Eunice, without Google, is the software, have you seen any of this Huawei software? Is there a sense that they have an OS, an operating system that will be able to compete effectively?
I think that at this point, a lot of people think that Huawei doesn't have the technology to be able to survive or compete effectively for a very long time. They have a huge R&D budget. They've invested a lot, and they've been talking a lot about developing their own chips. But a lot of their components and their software are from the United States. So they really rely on the U.S., which is why it's seen as such a major blow to Huawei at this point.